In this video, we will discuss how the Ottoman Empire could have completely collapsed before World War I, significantly altering political dynamics and possibly preventing the communist revolution in Russia due to the absence of the Caucasian Front. The fact is that in the case of an alternative dissolution of the Ottoman Empire, the League of Three Emperors could have survived, significantly altering the sides of the conflict. Before delving into this alternative, I will explain how the Ottoman Empire could have collapsed about 40 years earlier than it did in our timeline. This became possible due to the Russo-Turkish War of 1877-1878, in which the Ottoman Empire was swiftly defeated. Serbia, Montenegro, and Romania officially gained independence, while Bulgaria conquered all these territories except the last part, which would have given Russia access to the Mediterranean, alarming Britain. As a result, the Berlin Treaty was signed 3 months later, significantly reducing the size of Bulgaria. A more important fact is that the League of Three Emperors collapsed for the first time after this war, as Austria-Hungary feared Russia would take control of the Balkans. But more importantly, they feared Russia would push Serbia towards uniting the southern Slavs of Austria-Hungary. In 1882, Italians joined Germany and Austria-Hungary, forming the Triple Alliance. Thus, in the case of an alternative ending to the Russo-Turkish War, the sides of the conflicts could have changed significantly. Now I will show what I have devised. At first, Bulgaria was to appear as a vassal state of Russia, as the nephew of Russian Tsar Alexander II was to take the throne of Bulgaria. This is why the great Western powers agreed to reduce the size of Bulgaria and, consequently, Russia. This is a key moment for the disintegration of the Ottoman Empire in the coming years. Before the war began, the League of Three Emperors was still intact, having been established in 1873, 4 years prior to the war's onset. Russia and its allies knew of the plans to liberate Bulgaria, while Austria-Hungary was promised direct control over Bosnia and Herzegovina as compensation for their neutrality. In the end, Russia indeed secured its achievements in the Balkans but refused to hand over all of Bosnia and Herzegovina to Austria-Hungary, later offering only a smaller part of the territory. This, of course, angered the Habsburgs, and Britain took advantage of the situation. The British promised Austria-Hungary all of Bosnia and Herzegovina if they supported the reduction of Bulgaria's size, which the Austrians agreed to. After that, the League of Three Emperors officially dissolved for the first time. In our alternative historical scenario, Russia could concede the desired territory to Austria-Hungary to maintain the balance of power in the Balkans, while Austria-Hungary would support Bulgaria for Russia. Russia would also promise the Habsburgs that Russia would not support Serbia if it decided to attack Austria-Hungary, as the Serbs aimed to unite the Slavs in the Balkans. If you think I'm trying to draw your attention to a video about Bulgaria, you are very mistaken. The main change in such a scenario would be that the League of Three Emperors would remain intact, which would radically alter the balance of power in the world. This would also be the key to the collapse of the Ottoman Empire before 1914. When the Great War historically began. What I said is not enough for Bulgaria to maintain its borders as promised in San Stefano. France and Britain would still seek to reduce its size to ensure that Bulgaria and Pannonia looked different. I want to make one more change. Historically, the Russians besieged the city of Pleven, which lasted a total of 145 days. The Russians and their allies suffered losses of 50,000 people. This is extremely important, as it delayed the Russian advance for several months, allowing France and Britain to combine their efforts to prevent Russia's expansion in the Balkans. At that time, the people of Europe largely supported the Bulgarian calls for independence. This is related to the fact that documents and books about the April Uprising of 1876 and the Batak Massacre of the same year reached Western Europe. These materials contain shocking information about how the Ottoman Empire suppressed Bulgarian uprisings, killing everyone in its path. I cannot go into details as it is forbidden on the platform, but I think everyone understands that the Ottoman Empire was not particularly merciful to its subjects, especially non-Muslims. As for the Batak Massacre, American scholar Eugene Scheyer personally visited the site to document what happened, and then published his materials in the Daily News. But if you decide to familiarize yourself with them, as many Europeans did in 1876, you will be outraged by the actions and cruelty of the Ottoman Empire. Therefore, if Russia had not delayed in Pleven, it could have achieved victory faster and threatened Constantinople, securing Bulgaria according to San Stefano. This would mean that France and Britain would not have time to change the narrative and convince their citizens to support the Ottoman Empire in resisting Russian expansion in the Balkans. As a result, Russia would be able to carry out its plans despite the discontent of France and Britain. This is very important, as the French and British could use the hatred towards the Ottoman Empire to their advantage and strike the country, promising to liberate many peoples in the process. The worldview of France and Britain would be that if you can't win, it's better to join, and they would also take advantage of the weakening of the Ottoman state. France and Britain found themselves in a difficult position and needed to invade the Ottoman Empire to counter Russian expansion and restore the balance of power. This makes my hypothesis that such a development is highly likely even more convincing. The alliance of three emperors still exists, and France and Britain need to expand if they want a chance in a potential war against these countries. Italy would have been an obvious ally of France and Britain, possibly signing an agreement and forming a triple alliance to oppose the League of Three Emperors. Italy will become a valuable addition to the alliance, as it could be granted Libya and potentially other lands taken from the Ottoman Empire. Moreover, Italy claims lands with an Italian population in Austria-Hungary, so it will join France and Great Britain in an attempt to strengthen its position and acquire these territories. Historically, France, Great Britain, and Greece also benefited from the Russo-Turkish War. France received Tunisia for free. Great Britain took Cyprus in exchange for guarantees of Ottoman protection in case of a Russian attack, and Greece received about half of the province of Thessaly for free. In 1882, the British seized Egypt from the Ottoman Empire, although it formally remained Ottoman territory until the start of World War I, but practically became British. These are the lands that France and Britain received free of charge right after the Turkish War of 1878. But this time, I believe they will officially invade the Ottoman Empire and seek more. The invasion will easily conquer all of North Africa, and perhaps Britain will promise independence to the Arabs, which will also cause the Ottoman coalition to expand in this region. Of course, this independence will be granted as compensation for the relinquishment of resource rights in favor of France and Britain, similar to what happened with Iran in history. At that time, the Ottoman Empire controlled only part of the Balkans, its capital Constantinople, and all of Anatolia. I believe it is highly likely that the Balkan states of Montenegro, Serbia, and Greece will also invade the Ottoman Empire, as these countries claim their respective territories. Considering how the First Balkan War unfolded in history, I would say the Balkan League will take advantage of the Ottoman Empire's weakness and finally drive them out of the Balkans. Bulgaria is unlikely to strive for Tallinn, as they will pursue the city for historical, strategic, and cultural reasons. Russia will likely enter the war again, or support Armenian rebels fighting the Ottomans, becoming a Russian protectorate. For the purposes of this video, I will choose the second option. Zooming in, one can see all the countries that the Ottoman Empire will fight in this alternate timeline. This takes place immediately after the defeat in the Russo-Turkish War of 1877, so the Ottoman Empire is in a very weak state, potentially collapsing and surrendering. I intend to consider the peace treaty, but the video is only half finished, as I also want to tell you how the situation could have changed after World War I in the Balkans. Bulgaria could expand westward, capturing the city of Tallinn, while Montenegro would gain additional territories, nearly doubling its holdings. Serbia and Greece would likely divide Albania. Let me explain why. Historically, after the First Balkan War, France and Great Britain insisted on the creation of a free and independent Albanian state. However, considering that Greece and Serbia are now fighting on the same side as France and Britain, the Albanian state may never be created, or its size will be significantly reduced. Greece, in turn, will capture the remaining Ottoman holdings in the Balkans, as well as large territories of eastern Anatolia, populated by Greeks and Turks, which will also lead to more than a twofold increase in its territory. The Greeks' acquisition of Pontus would be unlikely, as both Traian and the League of Three Emperors would oppose it. Realistically, they would also need Constantinople. As for the status of Constantinople, I think a compromise could be found where the city would become an international zone. Russians have historically claimed it, but with their vassal state Bulgaria and territories in the Balkans, they already have better access to the Mediterranean and can bypass the straits. Therefore, I believe that Russia will not care much about Constantinople in this alternative reality, but will not allow France and Britain to seize it. Such a compromise in the form of an international zone will satisfy all parties. As for the rest of the Ottoman Empire, I see Britain supporting Arabia by granting it exclusive rights to resources, while France will likely gain the Levant, renaming it the Mandate for Syria and Lebanon. Great Britain will do the same with Kurdistan and Iraq, creating its mandates. Historically, the mandate system was introduced by Article 12 of the League of Nations Covenant in 1919. So 40 years later, Woodrow Wilson actively supported this idea, but I don't think it's too strange if we introduced this system 40 years earlier. The essence of the mandate system was that European countries occupied other nations, believing them incapable of creating stable governments. Thus, Europeans eagerly civilized them, developed them, and promised to grant independence when they were ready. Of course, the part about independence never happened, so the mandate system became just a beautiful word for colonies. The French and British promised to unite Arabia, the mandate for Syria and Lebanon, the mandate of Kurdistan, and the mandate of Iraq when they are ready. As for the rest of the Ottoman Empire, Armenia could establish its own state and become a Russian protectorate, while the remaining lands would form an Ottoman state. You may notice that the League of Three Emperors has a clear advantage over the three Balkan powers, and you would be correct. The problem is that the League of Three Emperors is likely to dissolve soon after the end of this war. This is due to Austria-Hungary's inability to strengthen its position, while Russia and Bulgaria became stronger. This is how the League of Three Emperors historically dissolved for the second time in 1887. I see that the dual alliance between Germany and Austria-Hungary will remain in place, as it was in history, but Russia will likely go its own way. The year discussed in this video is 1887, and we have 26 years to reach 1914, when the Great War began. In these 26 years, much can change, but for the purposes of this video, we will assume that everything remains the same. Only the Ottoman Empire will be divided. It is quite possible that the Great War will not start at the same time, and in the same ways, so we cannot say exactly how or when it will happen. For convenience, I will still stick to the year 1914, although this is, of course, extremely unrealistic. The first thing I want to mention is Bulgaria. In 1887, the nephew of the Russian Tsar was overthrown, and an Austrian nobleman was appointed in his place, normalizing relations with neighbors. However, I doubt that this will happen, so Russia's influence on Bulgaria will only increase. I also assume they will be able to win Romania to their side by promising them Transylvania in case of war with Austria-Hungary. The double alliance will also try to gain Romania by promising them Bessarabia, but Transylvania is much more desirable for the Romanians, so they are likely to side with Russia. Overall, there are three main factions: the Triple Alliance, the Double Alliance, and the Russian sphere of influence. Perhaps Russia will turn out to be much stronger than in our reality, which will significantly change the situation in Asia. I see that Russia has a better chance of winning against Japan in the Russo-Japanese War of 1905. And for the purposes of this video, I declare that Russia wins, although it requires a separate video. I believe that Russia could achieve better results, as Constantinople would become an international zone, and the Russian fleet could head to Asia. However, I expect that Britain will still hinder them from using the Suez Canal. In this unrealistic scenario, I would say that Russia will gain control over Korea, which will bring Japan closer to its best friend Germany, Russia's rival. If the Great War begins as it did in history, the Central Powers will have no chance, as Bulgaria and the Ottoman Empire will never side with Germany. Bulgaria is firmly in the Russian sphere of influence, and the Ottoman Empire is weak and likely to remain neutral. This will significantly reduce the capabilities of the Central Powers. There is a likelihood that the Triple Alliance will not be involved in the war, or at least not immediately. This will happen because when Serbia kills Franz Ferdinand in the Austrian-controlled area of Bosnia-Herzegovina, Russia will protect its interests. The Slavic brothers of Serbia, France, Britain, and Italy are not obliged to immediately join this war, but I believe they will ultimately join in a few months or a year after the conflict begins. It is more than likely, as Britain will want to seize German colonies and connect Cape with Kirov, while France seeks to reclaim Alsace and Lorraine, and Italy wants to acquire territories populated by Italians in Austria-Hungary. The Triple Alliance could wait a bit while the Central Powers exhaust their forces against each other on the front, before striking at the Central Powers themselves. Considering this, I don't think there is a chance for trench warfare, as it was not observed on the Eastern Front and on the Western Front. France and Britain will advance too quickly and capture German defensive positions. This is because Germany was not prepared for a two-front war. The Schlieffen Plan may still be realized, or perhaps France will be the one to invade Belgium. I cannot say for sure, so it remains open to interpretation. Of course, the British will not be pleased if Belgium's neutrality is violated, but if the Western Front stalls, it may become a necessity. All I can say is that the Central Powers will certainly capitulate much sooner. This war could end by Christmas if the Triple Alliance joins from the very beginning. I think this will happen, as Austria-Hungary is effectively waging war on three fronts: West, east, and south. This pressure will undoubtedly lead to the collapse of the Habsburg monarchy, leaving Germany with a war on three fronts while also facing rapidly advancing forces in the west. As a result, Germany will sooner or later capitulate. This means that the United States will not be involved in the conflict, so the ideas of self-determination will not be relevant. Furthermore, since the war will be short, European countries will not go bankrupt. Of course, with a shorter war will come a softer peace treaty. Let's consider this in more detail. Serbia will likely receive all of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and possibly Croatia if the turmoil in Austria-Hungary is significant enough. Montenegro will probably gain part of Croatia and other minor territories. The unification of Serbia and Montenegro to form Yugoslavia may not happen, but considering how successful the Serbs have been in this endeavor, I would say it is still possible, although the chances are lower. Austria-Hungary is likely to lose all of southern Transylvania to Romania, as well as Italian-populated territories to Italy, which excludes most of Libya, as the British never promised it to the Italians in the London Treaty of 1915. This means that Italy will only receive South Tyrol and the peninsula. As for Russia, they will likely take all of Galicia at the expense of Austria-Hungary, leaving the Habsburgs with only some territories. As for the essence of the video, I see that France will capture Alsace and possibly more territories to punish the Germans, as there will be no one to stop them. Expanding France to the Rhine would be too bold a move, but acquiring sand and some other R states is more than possible. However, Denmark will never receive any free territory in this process, so the peace treaty will differ significantly from Versailles. As for colonial issues, I can imagine that France and Britain will divide the German colonies just as they did before. Belgium may receive Rwanda and Burundi if they are occupied by Germany as compensation. Conversely, if France violates Belgium's neutrality, these lands will go to Great Britain. I leave this to interpretation. Finally, Russia will take the region of the Free Polish Territory, which translates to Greater Poland, the homeland of the Polish nation. This means that Poland will be fully united, and Russia will see it as a kingdom, albeit under the protection of the Russian Empire. I note that communism never oppressed the Russian people for 69 years, so the world in this scenario has changed significantly, especially in light of the absence of the Ottoman Empire in the Great War. The question of whether Germany will change in a nationalist direction remains complicated, but I strongly doubt it, as Wilhelm II will likely remain in power, and there will be no Weimar Republic, nor destructive military operations. This does not mean that Russia will become the threat you might imagine. They will still be sufficiently competent and ineffective as before. Watch the video on the screen to see how Russia might have looked if it had been more competent in the Great War. I hope to see you there and wish you all the best. Farewell.